Thanks for coming back to watch another of my videos looking at my 3 artwork albums. This is actually the 4th video and it will be the last one. So if you've not seen the previous 3 and you would like to, I'll link those above. Just to let you know, the first one covered my school years, and then the second album was actually split into 2 videos. So the first video was kind of pages from my sketchbooks during my college years, and then the next one was the actual college coursework. And then today I'm going to share with you the third one, which started in 1993 when I left college when I was 18, and I've left the end date blank because this is basically for anything that's done on bigger loose sheets of paper rather than in a sketchbook. So although technically this one covers more years, it's actually got less in it than the other 2 albums. So let me show you what's in here. Okay, so we start off with these couple of watercolour houses, and this was my grandparents' farmhouse, so this was where my mum grew up, and then this was my great-grandparents' bungalow. I've just covered up some personal information there because other family members still live in these houses. And then we've got something very different, Thumper. This was painted by my husband and I at the time when we were still dating, and I expect I probably drew Thumper and then between us we painted it. These 2 car images are actually photocopies. I don't know what happened to the originals. I believe the originals were bigger than this, and then I reduced them down because I wanted to put them on a letterhead. So I quite often, if I write letters, they tend to be quite long. So I actually did 2 pages. So the first page had this in the bottom left corner and then my address at the top. And then this was at the bottom right corner of the second page, which was just blank. So if I was writing a short letter, then I would just use the one. And if it was a longer letter, then it would use both. At a later date, I actually had a car like this myself, or in fact I had 2. I had a maroon one, and then later I had a lime green one of the same style as this, apart from the fact that mine was the 4-door version, whereas my dad had the 2-door version. I did a few evening classes for portrait sketching, and this is one that I did copied from a photo using charcoal, and I have to say I don't like it. But there you go. And then this lady actually sat for us in the portrait class. So I've got 2 views of her from different angles, and I was really happy with those. The detail on the face in particular I was really pleased with, although her hair looks quite rushed. But overall I was really happy. And then my husband actually came and sat for us in the class as well. And this was, if you saw my my school years sketches, and when I was 12 I'd drawn a picture of a duck, and I was saying in the video that I liked the top half of the duck and I liked the bottom half of the duck, but the 2 together didn't quite match. It was like they were at 2 different scales. And that's basically the same as I've done here with my portrait of Trevor. It's like from his eyes up, I think, yeah, that's not too bad. And then from his nose down, not too bad. But somehow it doesn't quite, the scale is not right as a whole. And I can't quite pinpoint what's wrong with it. I just know it's wrong. And then this one I was really happy with. This was my nan, so my mum's mum, whose farmhouse I showed earlier, and this is the photo which I used and to copy. So yeah, I was really happy with that. This one was a work colleague's cat, and she gave me a photo and asked me to draw a picture of her cat, and I was really happy with the cat just as a sketch of a generic random cat, but it didn't quite capture the personality of her specific cat. But not having the photo to compare it to, sometimes that's a good thing, because I can just look at this on its own merit. And I remember at the time that I wasn't quite happy with how it compared to the photo. But now, you know, I can't compare it to the photo because I haven't got the photo anymore. So I can look at this and just think, yeah, that's quite a good sketch. Couple more cars. So this is a Mark I Cortina, which belonged to a friend of mine. I've blanked out his name. He doesn't own this car anymore, but it was a Mark I Cortina, and it was a Lotus, which is normally they have the green stripe at the side. But this particular car had started its life as a police car, so it was just plain white, and then he had magnetic signs that he would put on it when he took it to a car show to show its history as a police car. But obviously, you know, when he was just driving it around generally, then the police signs would have to come off, so they were just for show. And when I did these, I did just the basic plain car first, no number plate, so it's just a generic, it's just a Mark I Cortina. And then I photocopied that and then added on the number plate and the police signs, so it was then very specifically his car. But yeah, I was really happy with those. And then I had a go at a couple of caricatures. So this is my husband and me. And when I first met Trevor, it was at work, and the first day I met him, the boss introduced him to me as the kamikaze cyclist, because just a couple of days prior to that he'd been knocked off his bike on a roundabout. And then for me, I've called myself the grease monkey because I was into classic cars. So this is me supposedly in my overalls with my toolbox, a mug of tea, and then a car which is leaking oil. And then from there I decided that I would add some colour. So I just did a photocopy of these and then added some watercolour. And I don't know how clearly it shows up on the video, but the paper is really wrinkly because I've just put watercolour on. This is just like normal photocopier paper. So yeah, that's us in our full glory. And do you remember in my school video where I said about the picture I'd done of my mum when I was like 5 or 6 years old, that I'd not put any colour inside her glasses, and I was like, Mum's got no skin around her eyes. And I've done the exact same thing for myself. And then this one, I have no recollection whatsoever of why I drew this. I've got a vague feeling that it was copied from a photo in a newspaper. I don't know who the footballers are. I don't know what team they're from. Why I decided to draw them, who knows? It might have been a request from another work colleague. But yeah, I have no interest in football whatsoever. So why I drew that, who knows? Whether it looks like the person it's supposed to, I don't know, because I don't know who it's supposed to be. And this was a drawing which I did of a wooden sculpture that we'd bought for my brother and sister-in-law. This is a photocopy. I believe I probably gave them the original, but my brother-in-law had added a few extra details, which is why there's 2 signatures on here. So I believe the bits which he added were some of the sharper wing details, because I'd left it quite rounded because I was drawing the actual wood sculpture, whereas I think he wanted it more to look like an actual drawing of a bird rather than a drawing of the sculpture. And then possibly he may have added the longer tail as well. I can't quite remember which bits he added, but definitely the wingtips. And then this one was a request from a work colleague. She was into the South Park cartoon, and she had this massive keyring of Kenny, and the line in the programme of where they were saying they killed Kenny. Well, I changed it to they keyed Kenny because he was on the key ring. And again, this is another photocopy because I gave her the original. Another one that's a photocopy. There's a lot of photocopies in this album. I believe this was for the same work colleague who had the Kenny keyring and also the cat as well. She was very much into horses. This one's an original. This was just a very quick, scrappy sketch I did of a chap having a coffee or something, looking out the window of the room that I was working in. And I don't remember who he was, and I'm sure his feet did not look like that. But actually I really like it. It's so rough, it's so quick and scrappy that it's got something about it that I just like. And then from here to the end of the album, everything relates to our holidays in Ireland. And we went here 4 times for our anniversaries. So we went for our 3rd, 5th, 7th and 10th wedding anniversaries. And we'd actually booked it again to go for our 15th. But sadly, my husband died just a few months before our 15th anniversary. So instead of going with Trevor, I ended up taking my parents, and I actually scattered his ashes while we were there because this was such a special place that meant so much to us. We just really loved it so much. So this was in a village called Ardmore in County Waterford, and this little cabin was called Malarkey's. And we had a little balcony and a garden at the side, just the cliff and then the sea. So we were the only property on this side of the road facing the sea. So we had uninterrupted views of the sea. And then just sort of outside our garden along the street, there were some steps that came down to a pier. So yeah, so that was the view looking up from the pier to the cabin. And then this, I believe, I did from our balcony looking down to the pier. Just a very vague, vague sketch with vague colours. And then again, this is looking the other way from the pier. So the pier is here, and then just looking across to the headland. And again, very, very pale, very vague colours, but just to give an impression of the place. And then these next few pages were from our second visit to Ardmore, and these were taken from a ring-bound sketchbook. And I'd been keeping these sketches in the back of the photo albums from these visits. And when I put together my art albums, I wanted to include these. So I've got the originals here, and then I've actually done copies, and I've put copies in the photo albums. So whether I'm specifically looking at the art or specifically looking at the photos, I can kind of see these sketches. So this is views from our cabin, so just a few boats that were in that harbour area. This was looking across to the other side of the bay, and then this is the post at the edge of our balcony. I don't know what kind of pen I'd used, but over time it's faded. I mean, it was black initially, and it's gone sort of like a browny purpley colour over time, and it's kind of seeped through the paper. But I quite like how it's aged. And then this is another view from the pier looking up to the cabin, and then I've just loosely in the background drawn the houses which were on the other side of the street. And when I did this one, I drew it as if there was nothing behind, but in actual fact there were buildings on the other side of the street, so I've sort of loosely included those here. And then just a couple of different views from actually on the pier. I can't remember if this is actually Trevor fishing. I know he did spend some time fishing off the pier, but whether that was him or somebody else I drew, I can't actually remember, which is embarrassing to admit, but there you go. But yeah, I really like this one. Ah, our lovely Molly. So Molly belonged to the couple that owned the cabin that we were staying in, and they actually run a pottery down the road in the village. And most mornings Molly would come, she would jump over the garden gate and come round the front of the cabin and look in the glass door at the front to see if we were there. And we'd let her in, and obviously some days she'd just come in and she'd have a bit of a fuss, or if we were still having breakfast or whatever, she would just curl up on the rug and wait for us. And often then when we would go out for a walk, she would just follow us. So it was literally like we'd hired a dog for the week. And she would just become such a big part of our memories attached with this place that, yeah, she was lovely. Such a sweet dog. I don't quite know what it would be like for anybody staying there that didn't like dogs. I guess maybe they just wouldn't let her in. But I suppose because her owners owned the cabin, she was probably just used to going in and out with them, like when they were there cleaning it or whatever. So, yeah, she was really sweet. And then here we've just got 3 sketches of bits of driftwood, which I thought were interesting shapes. And then this is the castle, or the watchtower. And it was built in 1867, and it was used as a watchtower and signal station until 1921 apparently. And this was, I just did views from different angles, and then also from inside looking out through the window. I don't know why, I just really love views looking out of windows. While I was drawing this, my husband was very patiently waiting, but he did also take a few photos of me while I was sketching, and this is one of them. Hopefully there's not too much reflection on there, and I really like that. I had no idea that I was having my photo taken. And this cardigan that I'm wearing, I bought that while we were on holiday, and I loved it, but sadly I'd long since outgrown it. But I ended up giving it to my mum, so I still sometimes see the cardigan when my mum's wearing it. And then this is St Declan's stone. There's lots of emphasis in this area about St Declan, and legend has it that he came to Ireland before St Patrick, and he came from Wales, and apparently he'd left his bell behind in Wales, and then this giant rock followed him across the sea, floating with his bell on top, so that he was reunited with his bell. I don't remember the significance of the bell, but that's the legend anyway. And this massive boulder on the beach is kind of supported on kind of these 2 kind of pinnacle kind of rocks with a gap underneath, and there's some legend involving, you know, if you can crawl underneath the gap, or I can't remember the exact details. But yeah, there were lots of things in the area that were named after St Declan. And then this was nearby, near a beach further along. And this is 2 views of a lime kiln, I believe. And I started off with this one, and I was quite happy with how it was going, but obviously I'd done it too near the top of the page, and I wanted to show, you know, the broken down top edge, so that's why there's a second view, but it's less detailed, but just because I wanted to show the top. And then this one, I really like this one. There are so many old broken down cottages like this in Ireland. Here's another view of the pier with chaps fishing. And then in our cabin we had this little peat burner stove, and we just really wanted to have it lit. So we'd put the peat in and lit it, and it got so hot so quick. It was a lot of heat coming out of it, but also because the cabin was so small, it heated up really quickly. So we ended up having to open the doors and windows. And then obviously this is the front, and then this is the view of the side panel here. And one of the things which Ardmore is famous for is the round tower. Probably doesn't show very clearly on this sketch how tall it is. I probably should have looked up the actual height, but it's really tall. And round the other side there's a doorway kind of up here somewhere, so in times of trouble, if they were being invaded, then they would take all their religious artifacts or their valuables into the tower up a ladder, and then pull the ladder in after them so that they were safe. And then this end wall of what's left of the cathedral, in these kind of arch parts, there's carved scenes from the Bible. Most of them are not recognisable to me. They were quite worn. You could see Adam and Eve and the tree, and there's also one with Solomon and the baby. But apart from that, I couldn't really make out what any of the others were. But I imagine that would have been really impressive carvings when it was new, or when it was new enough that it hadn't been worn away with time. But yeah, it was such a lovely place and so many special memories there. And then just one more picture to show you was this lovely little dog sat on the doorstep. So this is copied from a photo, and the photo was taken on our third visit to Ardmore in 2004. But I didn't actually do the painting until 2010. And this is another one of those where if I showed you the photo alongside, the painting doesn't quite capture it. But without looking at the photo, I can look at this and I can remember that particular dog who was so often sat on the doorstep when we walked up and down our street. I say our street, I mean we went, it felt like it was home. Yeah, he was just always sat on the doorstep, and a friendly dog, but not friendly like Molly. Like, he didn't follow us. He was just friendly to say hello to. But yeah, I really like this, and I like how the details kind of fade out at the edges. But like I say, it doesn't really compare to the photo. But then why should it? I think it's one of those things, when we copy from a photo, we think it should look the same as the photo, but it's okay if it doesn't. I'm saying that because, I'm making myself feel better, but it's true. It brings back the memory, and you can see that it's a dog. I hope you can see that it's a dog sat on the doorstep, and that's all there, even though it's not photorealistic. So there you go. That's the end of my artwork albums. And like I say, this was in 2010. So there was a big gap between this and then the previous sketches, which were in 2002. So I don't know what happened in that 8-year gap in between. I don't know if I was not sketching or if I just didn't do anything that was worthy of being kept. I don't know. And then there's another gap of a few years, I believe, before I then started on the sketchbooks. So there wasn't much art happening at this point in my life, I don't think. So that's it for the end of this series with my albums. And next time I'll be showing you the start of my sketchbooks that I've kept.